Welcome to Midlife Matters. I'm Marie, and each week I'm joined by my friends Julie and Mindy to talk about all the topics keeping women in the middle years up at night. Today we're talking all about DIY landscaping and gardening. I don't have a green thumb, but we're bringing on a special guest, my mom, Nancy. She'll join Mindy and Julie to inspire all of us to try planting and cultivating something new this year. Let's get started. Hey, Mindy.
Hey, Marie. How are you?
Good. Hey, Julie.
Hey, Marie. It's good to see you.
Good to see you guys. I'm excited about today's topic, gardening. It's really interesting for me because I don't garden at all, but you guys love it.
Yes.
Although, Mindy, I'm sure
I love the results.
Yeah. I'm sure that you've noticed that the gardening season starts later in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. It's very different. So it's kind of nice to watch it this year, while we don't have a house, so that next year maybe I'll know what to do.
Right.
I can see what grows here well.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be talking all about gardening today, both vegetable and flower gardens. And this is a topic that I know very little about, but we've brought on a special guest to join the two of you talking about gardening. And it is my mom, Nancy. Hi, Mom.
Hi.
Yay. We're so excited that Nancy's with us.
Yes. My mom and dad have gardened for years, and you would think that I would enjoy gardening because my dad has a vegetable garden just about every year of my life. I don't know how many bags of zucchinis and tomatoes and squash I've taken home over the years because, those are the things that people always have an excess of.
I love those people too that give me those extra vegetables. I'm like, yes, I will take those.
Yes. And then my mom has had herb and flower gardens for many years. It's not anything that I've ever been interested in, especially having been busy raising 5 kids. But now that people are older and aren't needing me as much, I can see that I might enjoy gardening in the future.
Well, and you've just enjoyed the surplus of their garden, so you haven't really needed to.
That's very true. So I'm just going to be asking the questions today and learning from these 3 other ladies, just like the listeners. And I know that we have probably some people that have gardened for many years. And of interest to me is that just this weekend, Julie's daughter started planting an herb garden for the first time. So she was excited about this episode. And then my daughter just texted me this morning and said, we asked our landlord if we can have a garden. And I didn't even know that was something that interested her. So I think that there's probably a lot of listeners that would like to get started, but we just don't know how. Mom, let's start with you. Can you introduce yourself and tell us what gardening means in your own life and how you got started?
Yes, I'd be happy to. My name is Nancy, but I'm mom to 4 grown and married children and nanny to 10 grandchildren. I'm also a retired special education teacher. It seems gardening has always been a part of our 47 years of married life. My husband loved to grow vegetables, which we then harvested, canned, froze, and stored for cooking in the winter months. I didn't have time to be outside in the garden, but as the kids became teenagers and they were busy with sports or part-time jobs, I had more time on my hands. Also at that time, I discovered home decorating magazines that featured beautiful gardens, country living, Victoria, country home. They all appealed to my creative side.
Yeah, as you were talking, Mom, I forgot that we used to can a lot. Even that's a big part of gardening, canning, storing, putting all that kind of stuff up.
Yes, when you've got other plans and your husband brings in a big carton of vegetables, all of a sudden you have to be put up or they're going to rot or go bad. You all of a sudden have a big job to do.
Right.
I'm ashamed to say I'm one of those that has had many rotted vegetables because I have actually never done like the canning part of all of this. So that part is new to me. Nancy, you mentioned those magazines. I grew up seeing those magazines on my mom's table, and the magazine era seems to be slowly dying out, which is sad to me. I love to see those magazines on the table, and I have been through all of those before.
Gardening is a lifelong skill. It's something that we can do from when we're young all the way up until we're in our 90s. It gives us something to nurture, to watch grow, and we can see the fruits of our labor. There is peace and quiet and a feeling of being in prayer because you feel God's presence in all the beautiful flowers and
Yeah, although I could honestly say that I have never been in prayer out in the yard. I've been cursing the thorns and the weeds. And I'm sure that Steve's been cursing me before. Like, why does he have to be out here mulching and doing all these things? So we've not yet reached that plane. How about you guys, Julie and Mindy?
Yeah, dealing with the curse. The curse of weeds.
It's true. I was thinking about that back in Genesis. That's what it said.
No, but it is a peaceful feeling when you're not taking weeds out. When you're planting something and hoping it will grow and trying to keep something alive, there is kind of you get a good feeling from that.
It's great physical exercise and it grounds you. It uses your senses of smell, taste, touch, sight, the sense of anticipation. You're looking forward to something. And you even look forward to rainy days because you know it's going to give your flowers a good drink.
That's true. And then I think, I don't have to water today.
I know.
We haven't had to water very much in Tennessee this spring. We've had a lot of rain.
I know.
All right. Well, Mindy and Julie, what got you guys into gardening?
I'll say I have a specific memory of when this all started. Our audience knows I was married young. I was 18. My husband was 20. And so there wasn't really a lot of time spent nurturing these skills before I got married. Once I had Abby Ray and I started staying at home, I was no longer working. And I just specifically remember that she was she was toddling around. She was probably 2. And my mom had all of these just seeds that she had taken from her flowers and she gave them to me. So seeds for like zinnias, marigolds, 4 o'clocks, just some like really easy to grow flowers. And there was just a little space in front of our home that the soil was already ready. It was really rich soil. It was separated from the grass. It had a border. And I thought, this is like a no-brainer. I had never done it. I threw the seeds in there. Several weeks later, I'm like, I got to watch them come up. Little Abby and I would go out and we would take turns with the hose. She would spray me with the hose and we would laugh and giggle. And we just got to watch those flowers grow. And then we would go out and we would deadhead them. And then we would take the seeds out of like the 4 o'clocks and things like that. And so it just was so much fun with her that kind of first year staying at home, her helping me, just created this love for being outside, being with her, getting our hands dirty in the dirt and watching things grow.
Oh, that's nice. And it's really good that your first effort was so successful.
Yeah, the soil being so rich and prepared, it was like a blank slate ready for me to do it. So it made it very easy.
You just got to do the fun part.
Just the fun. Yeah, it was a nice,
Well, what got you started, Julie?
I have always preferred to be outdoors over being indoors. So I think it started when my kids were young. It was an escape. It was an escape from all the babies, taking care of babies and stuff. It was my chance to be outside and just think making your little patch of earth more beautiful. There's just something really rewarding about that. And then you can create a space that you like to be in, you like to spend time in. And even if I think, in our first apartment, it was just flower pots. I didn't have any ground of my own, but just a few flower pots can transform your front porch, your patio, or your deck or whatever. I really spend a lot of time on the inside of my house to make it welcoming. So why would I ignore the outside? Mm-hmm. And it's great exercise. There's nothing like that shower after you've been sweaty and dirty and you sleep so well at night. It's just good for the mind and the body.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's dive into some technical questions. So I know the difference between annuals and perennials. Annuals, you have to plant every year. Perennials, they come up without you having to do anything. But let's talk about them in a little more detail. Like, when would you use one versus the other? Say you have that little blank space outside your house with the border and the dirt. How do you decide whether you use a perennial or an annual in there?
I used to plant annuals every year for color. It was so pretty to have all these flowering colors. But it just got really expensive and it required a lot of thought in the spring and more care and watering and deadheading. And I thought, I don't want to plant some plants that I know are going to reappear next spring, that I have to do this over and over and over again. So every year I've just been adding more and more perennials to my flower beds. And it's kind of fun to see if you can keep things blooming all year long. Like I have things that bloom early, and then spring, and then early summer, and then things that'll bloom all the way till frost. Then I'll just use my annuals maybe in pots. But yeah, I like to see things coming back every year and instant garden.
Right.
Gosh, I totally agree. Perennials are the way to go. And then I just have certain spots where I put a pot or I put annuals like in only certain areas, but it's not much. Like it's not the whole ordeal that it was before. But I think you get smarter maybe, or, saving yourself some time when you're going to work on your yard.
I mean, the annuals are beautiful. I see yards that have impatiens like the whole length of their flower, but that's beautiful.
It is.
It's just not for me right now. I might get to that point, but not right now.
How do you feel about the annuals versus the perennials, Mom?
Once again, I use the perennials to fill in large spaces, and I use annuals for bursts and pops of color here and there. And I find that if I put the annuals in the ground, it's a little less work because they seem to dry out faster in pots. But in the ground, they seem to bloom, and they're just taking in moisture from the ground. So a little easier there. But over the years, you learn what are the tried and true ones that you can really count on, the hardworking plants that will really work for you. And you learn to only put those in and kind of ignore the other ones that take a little more care. So, and also with perennials, it's great to share with your friends, people who have to thin out their perennial beds and they don't want to just throw them in the garbage. Other people are happy to take them and put them in places in their yard.
Yeah. So I'll take anybody's perennials that they want to get rid of.
There you go. Yes. Give Marie this.
My mom just called me last night and said, a friend thinned out her iris beds, and I've never grown iris, and it's the Tennessee state flower. So I want to have some in my yard somewhere. So she's going to give me those.
Oh,
so
cool.
I'm excited.
Now, I believe we have irises. Isn't it awful? I don't even know. I'm pretty sure they're blooming right now. I've never even thought about trimming them or thinning them, but they've never taken over, I don't think. How do you know if something needs to be thinned?
If it gets too crowded, it cramps the roots, and it might not grow out of its space, but it might stay in its space, but still be real compact and on top of each other in its space. And that's how you need to look for, and then thin them out so they have room to grow.
Okay. So these have been in here since 1986. They probably could use some thinning.
Why don't you make sure their iris is first and then go look at the ground?
I'll have my mom look when she leaves.
Holding out on us. Share with us, Marie.
Marie's going to post a picture. What is this?
It's the Tennessee state flower. I don't even know. Okay. So what are some perennials that you guys love, and why do you choose them?
Well, my favorite is hostas. I love them because they come in all shapes and sizes. They have lots of different colors, lots of different personalities. I love plants with personalities. And they like ferns and lots of ground covers.
Oh, I love hostas too. I have this area that's kind of a big blank area in my flower bed with no shrubs. So there's just hostas that, like you said, they fill up a space. That's what I like about those. And they stay beautiful till frost. I love salvia, this dark purple spikes of flowers, and they attract a lot of butterflies and bees. They'll bloom really long. I have lavender, Russian sage, Shasta daisies, and I love hydrangeas because you get a big wow, those big blooms.
I do love hydrangeas.
And they're and I like to dry them, so that's a bonus.
Yes. Now, listeners, we will put pictures of all the gardens that Julie and my mom and Mindy are talking about, and maybe put a little label, because I knew about 2 of the 5 flowers that Julie said. And there's probably other people that are out there like, ooh, I've heard of that flower, but what does it actually look like? Mindy, what do you love for perennials?
Well, okay, so I think everyone loves when early spring hits and daffodils start blooming.
Yes.
So I love to see those early spring bloomers. The daffodil, the hyacinth, the smell of hyacinth is just amazing. Of course, I totally agree with Julie. I love the sage. Hydrangeas are one of my all-time favorites. Some of the different colors out there are just really beautiful with the hydrangeas. I love phlox, and peonies are such a beautiful flower, but they're difficult a little bit. They're so beautiful that it's like I like to have one, but I don't plant many of them because I just feel like they're a little difficult.
You mean
I'd like to try that. Yeah.
do they have a hard time growing, or you just can't get them to bloom?
They grow and bloom, but the flowers are so big and beautiful and heavy. As soon as it rains, like they're laying on the ground.
Oh, okay.
You almost have to support the flower.
A little cage.
You're really not going to be able to enjoy them for very long because they kind of break in the wind or rain. But they sure are beautiful.
Okay. All right. Well, Julie, can you talk a little bit about the importance of the planting zone? You mentioned this to me, and I was interested to hear, what is it?
I think all plants have been assigned a hardiness zone, and you can look at planting zone maps, and it's just a guide to determine what plants are going to grow based on the average lowest temperature in your area.
Okay.
So like if you can go in and put your zip code in, and it'll tell you what zone you're in. So I'm in zone 7. Most of Middle Tennessee, I think, is 7 or 6. That says that the lowest average temperature is between 0 and 10 in the winter here.
Okay.
So it means that a plant can survive in that low temperature. Like it'll come back. It'll be hardy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So if you had something not in your zone, even if it was a perennial, it might not come back because it was too cold.
Right.
Okay.
So before you buy a plant, you should know your zone to know if it's going to survive.
It seems like they should only sell the plants that would live in your zone locally. Do they?
Well, I think that's probably what most of them are. Yeah.
Okay.
But if you're going to order something off a mail order, like a catalog or something, you have to be sure,
And sometimes when I've been on vacation, I've seen these beautiful plants. And so I will buy them there and bring them home, and, just waste of money because they didn't survive my zone.
I know, like if you're able to just even walk around your area for long enough that you're like, oh, I really like that. And you watch that it does well in your area. Or if you go to a local nursery, they can help you. But yeah, my mom was born and raised really in Georgia, and she lives in Missouri and has tried so hard to make her Missouri home like Georgia. So planting like pine trees and azaleas, and there's different things that she's tried to plant in Missouri, and she just keeps trying and cultivating these things and really fighting her zone.
Well, that's a really good point. I think that would become really important if you move a lot, because your zone, you're no longer in zone 7 up where you are. So you have to rethink what's going to survive.
It's true. And we spent some time in Denver, Colorado, and I remember when we were there, it's a completely different climate. I was really amazed at how different the deciduous trees are, the evergreens, the grass. I mean, things like that are just that you kind of start to know about your area, but then completely changes if you go somewhere else.
Okay. Well, what are some of the annuals that you guys love, and why do you choose them?
I think you have to have geraniums in the hot summer. There's something about bright red geraniums on the front porch that is just so classy to me. So I do put those in pots. Begonias is my all-time favorite thing to plant in the ground. There are monster begonias, and then there are smaller begonias. And I've actually started planting those at our Tennessee house. I have certain spots for, I've got the foundation, I've got the shrubs, I've got some perennials. And then in front of that, I have a place for 2 rows of begonias. And I plant some of these beautiful corally red monster begonias. And in front of that, I do white begonias. It is my favorite. I'm like, okay, this is my template every year. This is what I'm going to do for the front entrance. It looks phenomenal. So begonias are just one of my favorite flowers.
Oh, yes.
Those are pretty. Yeah. I love geraniums because they take full sun. I have a lot of sunny spots, so I like that. And begonias. I have some window boxes after we visited Charleston, South Carolina.
Yes.
I came back and got window boxes. And so I put the big monster begonias and caladiums and million bells. I think there's some kind of trailing white flower.
Oh, pretty.
And so I just put those in every year, and they do great.
And marigolds. Marigolds
Yes.
always are a winner. They
Yes.
grow all the time. And with the begonias, I used to put the little spikes in, but it took them so long to adjust and then start growing. And now the begonia baskets are pretty reasonable. They're only
Right.
$8.96. And I just buy the big baskets, take them out of the basket and plant them right in the ground. And I've got big flowers right away to start enjoying all summer.
That's
Yes.
exactly what I do, Nancy.
Uh-huh.
I buy the pots,
Yeah.
and they're already huge, and they
Yeah.
are just stunning.
Beautiful.
I got some planters for the first time last week with my mom, and we actually decided on begonias, and there were 3 different colors, I think like a coral, a red, and a white in the same basket, and it was really easy. I just transferred those from the basket into the planter, and it was instantaneous.
Wow, I'm really proud of you, Marie.
Those are the only flowers I have, Mindy.
Well, they should do great.
Yeah.
Your mom was thinking, I have waited for her to ask for my help for over 40 years.
Have you ever used lantana? Anybody?
Lantana, yes. And it is a great for in the sun. It is perennial in California, but it's only an annual in Tennessee generally.
Right.
Maybe sometimes you can get it, but boy, they grow beautifully here in the hot, dry.
One thing I thought was really funny is the tag said able to endure growing environments that are less than ideal. And I was like, that is the plant for me. I look for tags that say, drought tolerant, heat tolerant. And I think, well, if I forget it, maybe it'll stand a chance.
It has to be hardy. It's got to be able to survive or it's not happening in my yard.
Right. All right. So what are some flowers that really do well in full sun?
Most of your begonias do. The darker the leaf on the begonia, the darker the leaf on any plant usually can take more sun. Same with hostas if you have to put them in the sun, but usually they like shade. But the darker the leaf, the more sun tolerant they are. And the begonias and the marigolds and all those real flowering plants, they like sun to keep flowering.
Yeah, like the ones I have are geraniums, begonia, the Shasta daisies, lavender, sage, salvia, lantana, the limelight hydrangeas. I have another one that I just planted called Endless Summer, and it's a shade-loving hydrangea.
Right.
It's the one that'll turn purple, pink, blue.
Right.
And then now there are azaleas that bloom in the sun called Encore, and then there's the old ones that are shade. Then,
of course, your marathon roses. Those rose bushes,
roses.
yeah.
The knockout?
Marathon, knockout marathon, whatever you call them. Yeah, those are the ones they love sun.
That was my absolute dream plant. I had probably 20. And they're they would bloom till Christmas, my favorite thing. And then mine got the rosette disease, the virus.
Oh.
The incurable virus. And
I've never heard of that. Yeah.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
Because it started, I think, in Kentucky. And now it's incurable. Like when you're supposed to dig them up and burn them. And you can't replant. So I've lost them all. It gets like this. They call it witch's broom. And it looks like a mutation of the plant. It looks horrible.
Right.
So that's made me sad. I only have about 3 left. So.
Oh, wow.
I do see a lot of people with knockout roses, and I do love them. Love the look of them. Yeah.
Well, it was funny. Last spring, I had a dinner, and I invited some people over. And she brought me one of those little roses you buy in the grocery store, a little
like
tea rose plant.
The miniature one?
Yeah. So when it was done blooming, I planted it in my flower garden. And it grew and grew and grew and bloomed all summer up until even past the frost, stayed green all winter. And it is bigger and blooming. It's got tons of blooms on it this spring, all from that little tiny plant she brought me.
I don't know, Nancy.
That's a great idea.
I think that you have a magic touch there.
A green thumb.
All right. So what are some flowers that grow better in shade?
Well, shade impatiens. There's impatiens that are made just for shade. Those do beautifully.
I was going to say,
That's
up
why I don't have this.
azaleas and the rhododendrons, because you'll see rhododendrons even through the woods and hiking in Tennessee.
Your coral bells.
They're beautiful. And I even put like hydrangeas. Some of my hydrangeas did better to not be in the full sun. I was going to mention like flowers that grew in the sun. I even thought of trees and stuff. Like the crepe myrtle trees that pair well with other blooming things. And I love my cherry trees. I think it's Kwanzaa and Yoshino cherry trees. There's some of those early spring blooming trees and redbud trees. So I love to have trees along with the shrubs and the flowers, because then you can plan, maybe if that area of your yard doesn't have a blooming thing like in the spring, well, your redbud is going to have those beautiful purple flowery leaves on it. And then your cherry trees are just stunning, or crabapple trees, just stunning bushes.
Well, dogwoods, if you notice in the woods, in the wild, they grow in the shade. They grow all underneath the other trees in the forest. They kind of like shade. We tried growing one in the sun and it didn't make it.
Yeah, I love all those early spring trees, and then the crepe myrtles in the summer, or rose of Sharon. And then the crepe myrtle, you can get miniature versions of those and plant them in with your shrubbery, and they're stunningly gorgeous.
I have crepe myrtle bushes down in my front bed near the street, and they're probably 5 feet tall and wide now. You don't really ever trim them because they're slow growing, and they don't bloom till June. So after the azaleas and everything's and the spring flowers are gone, then they stay pink all summer.
Yes.
Now that we've talked about some different kinds of plants, what do we do? How do we get started on a DIY landscape plan?
I think the first thing is to get an idea of the look you want. So I started looking at Pinterest and magazines. Then, because like Nancy said, some of those plants may not grow in our area, I started driving through neighborhoods. One thing I noticed is most established older neighborhoods didn't really have any enviable landscaping. A lot of it was like overgrown. They hadn't trimmed it. I just don't know that landscaping is meant to last for 40 years or however. I think my house is probably 35 years old. So that's kind of what prompted my recent landscape redo. And I started by removing all the plants that I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. Actually, I did that last year. And then, choosing the plants, you just think about do you have sun or shade, what zone you're in, what kind of soil you have, and then what you want to bloom. And I just went to a nursery because I had been to Walmart and I was going to plant some boxwoods, and I noticed they were $14.99 at Walmart. So I go to this really nice nursery and talk with the owner, and his are 30 to 60. And I thought, okay, why should I pay 30 to 60 for your boxwoods when I can get them for 14 at Walmart? And he said that the plants at Walmart, if they looked healthy, were probably fine to buy. But he just had different varieties. Like you're just going to get the one boxwood that Walmart has. Whereas he had those plants that I was looking at were dwarf boxwoods. And he said dwarfs are always twice the price just because it's like a designer plant kind of. That's what I like about going to a nursery is the people at Lowe's. Sometimes you might just get a teenager or somebody that really doesn't know about plants. So I like to go to the nursery for their expertise. And then he told me he would draw up plants for me for $150 an hour. And I thought, So I went home and did a scale drawing of our flower beds. I got little graph paper and I thought I could put all these plants in there. And he said, oh, no, you're not going to have enough room for that. And I thought, no, this bed's pretty big, But the thing that he reminded me of was you had to consider the mature size of all the plants. I was looking at how tiny they were right now.
Right.
And so I cut out little green circles out of construction paper for my plants, and put them all in there. And sure enough, I couldn't fit even half of the ones I wanted to plant in there. So I thought, well, that was really good. And I was able to buy the plants, the shrubs, and then have a landscaping guy that works in our neighborhood. He came and dug the holes for me and put them in. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was really pretty easy.
How about you, Mindy? What do you do when you think about DIYing your landscape?
Goodness, we've done this ironically at every house that we've lived in, and we joke, okay, once we do the landscaping, that means we're going to move, because it always happens. So we will purposely wait, and we'll wait to do, and it'll drive us crazy. Then we'll finally do it, and then we'll move. So I would, especially for someone that is new to looking at landscaping, I would start with just, planting some annuals and see how you like it, and start walking neighborhoods or driving neighborhoods and see what you like. Your yard is just an extension of your home on the outside. Like Julie said, a lot of times we spend all of our time inside, but I do promise you have so much joy when you do something in the yard. You pull up and away from your house so many times a day that to see the work that you've done over and over again just brings immeasurable joy. Start with, a budget. landscaping, flowers, shrubs, trees, grass can be very time consuming and very expensive. So maybe start small is what I would encourage somebody to do.
The library is just filled with gardening books that you can check out and look at your leisure. Also at library book sales and garage sales, you can pick up books on gardening. They're just so inspirational, just things you never thought of. The ideas will be in there.
I love that. We've got Pinterest, we've got books, we've got, the things that you see that you like. But I would just start in a section. I would say, okay, this spot right here, I would like to work with that and kind of want these colors. Think about what you enjoy to look at. If you can find somebody else's yard and say, I really like those colors, I'd like to replicate that in my own yard. Figure out what those things are and plant something.
And always keep in mind, if you've ever been to Charleston and seen those adorable courtyard gardens, how tiny some of them must be, but they are the most beautiful gardens. I always remember that small is beautiful too.
Those are so charming. So everyone can start with something, whether it be a pot or just a little space. Put a potted plant on top of your outdoor table. Start there and see how much joy it is to look out at that.
The guy at the nursery told me, it's almost like interior design, but outside. Like
it is.
I have these, the only plants that I had, from previous years was these huge arbor vitae, the green, Christmas tree looking things on the corners. And I was trying to choose a foundation plant that would go in between them. And it was between boxwoods and yews and laurels. And he said, well, if you choose the yews, they're a fuzzy evergreen. He goes, they're going to look just like your arbors.
True.
He said the laurels have a shiny dark green, like the
glossy,
textures, they're a different color green, they're a different texture. And I had never even thought about that. Like like you would in an interior. Yeah.
Yep. I always do a darker, it's funny. I always do a darker foundational shrub that is an evergreen. And then I put lighter colors and different ornamental grasses around that. And then I'll do perennials. And my landscaping, I am very organized, but then I soften the edges and I create curves and I find things that kind of give it a softness, a gracefulness. So I do have a plan and it is organized and it does match for the most part, but then I add different things in, elements, and different people like different things. Some people are like, I really want my home to be cozy. I like a lot of blankets and pillows and I like stuff on my walls. And, I like a lot of things. And some people's gardens and yards will look that way. Some people are like, I like things neat in a row. I don't want things touching,
Well, Mindy, what you've described is called layering. It's, using small things in the front and then different sizes going back and gives it a depth.
Right. And I think that is the most beautiful for me. That's what I choose to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've kind of talked a little bit about some things to consider. You guys have said that you want to consider the size of your space, how much money you have, maybe the texture, the color, what kind of work you're going to have to go into it. How do we know what kind of soil we have? Julie, what is soil conditioning?
Out in my front flower beds, it was kind of clay-like. It would stick together and I don't know, it just didn't look very good in certain parts. And I was wanting to plant azaleas and it said they don't grow well in a clay soil. So conditioning, I guess, or amending the soil, just adding some organic matter, vermiculite, helps soil retain moisture if that's a problem that you have. Like if you have a real dry soil, peat moss, you can just till those things in. So I just dug really big holes for my azaleas and put like a whole 2 cubic bag of peat moss and stuff in the hole. I couldn't change the entire bed.
Right.
So each hole though has great soil.
Right.
And
so
I know some landscapers did that down in the front and those plants, they did great.
So you can kind of just feel your soil. If it feels real clumpy and clay-like, then make adjustments.
Yeah. And I know the county extension, if you call them, here it's through the University of Tennessee, they will do free soil testing for the pH of your soil. Oh. You can just take a sample over there. I think it takes a couple of weeks, but it's free.
And the opposite of clay is well-drained soil. When you water it, the water seeps down through. It doesn't sit. The roots have room to move around, and it's a healthy environment for a lot of plants.
I don't know if I've ever lived in a well-drained soil environment. Where are those places? Because
well, you might find them in the north.
Okay,
living in the north. I think there's a lot of clay down in the south.
I would say I've had a lot of clay. I've had a lot of rocks. When we lived outside of Atlanta, there was granite underneath everything. So things would grow and then all of a sudden they die because your roots couldn't go any further in the ground. So it's interesting. Yeah. So maybe that can be a bonus of Pennsylvania that I didn't, know yet.
So we talked about this a little bit. Julie, you mentioned that you could go to Lowe's or Walmart or a private nursery. So if someone's just starting out, what do you suggest?
Oh, I mean, I think if you know what you want, I would probably go to Lowe's. And one thing I think that's probably an advantage is I think they have a year warranty if you keep your receipt.
They do.
Whereas private nurseries don't. So,
and I have done that before. I have yanked plants out of the ground, stuck them in a Walmart bag, and returned them. If they have died, and they have been very good about taking those back.
Yeah.
So plus I think that a lot of times Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot will have a smaller variety. So you can kind of get away with that if you feel like, okay, I don't want to spend as much, but I really want the laurel as my foundational shrub. Maybe I'll get some smaller ones and they're going to take a lot longer to grow, but that's what I can afford and that's what I want. Now, if you want something that's larger and looks more mature, then a lot of times you do have to go to a nursery for that.
Yeah.
And always check the markdown rack at Lowe's. They have the best markdown racks. You can get all kinds of, we just got grapevines. We got a fig tree. I mean, just marked down, slashed. I got a rose bush, perennials, annuals.
Plus, if you know that that's a hardy thing in your area, then you can kind of bring those things back to life.
All right. Well, beyond the general beauty and really necessity of landscaping, I feel like it's another step above on the gardening ladder to plant an actual garden. Take your grass, dig it up, and this is something like creating something entirely new. So, Mom, do you want to talk a little bit about the kinds of gardens that can be planted and some of the ones you've particularly enjoyed over the years?
Well, there's a type of garden to suit everyone's tastes and desires. There's cut flower gardens. That's if you love to cut flowers and bring them in your house or give them to friends. Or there's a butterfly gardens that really do attract the butterflies. And then the perennial gardens, that are easily maintained, and wild flower gardens. These are as easy sometimes as taking a pack of wild flower seeds, throwing it in the ground and leaving it. And it used to be years ago, they had these rugs. They would have all the seeds in them and you'd roll the rug out, put dirt over it, and you had a wildflower garden.
Oh, that's
and
perfect.
Yes. And then they have moonlight gardens, which are all white flowers that shine up at night. And there's fairy gardens. If you're going to have grandchildren coming around, they are very fun. You can buy little miniatures and miniature plants and miniature gardening sheds and tools, and there's just no end to the creativity there. There's shade gardens, which we talked about. There's bulb gardens with iris, daffodils, tulips, hyacinths, gladiolas. There's rock gardens, mosses, tiny flowers, phlox, dianthus, on and on and on.
There are a lot of different gardens, and I think my parents have planted several of them over the years. I can remember when we would go to visit, and Abigail and Davis were little in particular when they lived in their Victorian house, and they would always want to go around and show us, Steve, myself, Abigail, and Davis, all that had happened in their gardens. And at the time, I'm sad to admit, I was like, do I really care what's happened in all these gardens? But now, as I'm older, I do appreciate the work that went into them and can see why they wanted to show me what had been happening in all these gardens. And it was always very interesting to the kids, especially, my dad might pull out some cherry tomatoes and, or, they might pick a flower or, I think kids are interested in that kind of thing just naturally.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, obviously it stuck with Abigail if that's the direction she's going already.
Yes.
But
well, and I find myself taking pictures of my garden now instead of children. It's like
well, you guys saw my Insta story. I was so happy when we traveled back to Tennessee. The first couple times I traveled back, my yellow roses weren't blooming yet. That is my favorite summer blooming flower.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow is my favorite color. These roses are big. They're beautiful. They smell heavenly. So the last time I was there, when we were together last week, my yellow roses were in bloom, and I was just so happy.
They are beautiful.
It was all over. That's all I wanted to take pictures of. I was like, yeah, I'm bringing Abby home for the summer, but look at my yellow roses.
We have in our house we have a little L shape, and it's right outside a big picture window in our kitchen. We have a bird bath and the flowers and the bird feeder, and I just sit in that window constantly and watch the flowers and the birds, and it's just no end to my enjoyment.
Well, Nancy, I want to come over and have a tour of your garden.
Oh,
there
sure.
You go. Well, Marie, I was going to say that when we would drive hours and hours to my parents' house, they've been in Missouri now for over 20 years. The first thing we do is we unpack, and then my mom and I walk around the yard. Mm-hmm. We tour the yard. She shows me the azaleas she's trying to keep alive up there in Missouri, and the pine trees that she's transplanted from Georgia. And we walk and talk about, trees that maybe died in ice storms. And we talk about how many peaches, she's gotten this year, apples, just different things. And I love it now. And you're right. At first I was like, okay, sure.
Well, and as a gardener, and you guys could speak to this more than I, but I would imagine that it's just like if you had done projects inside your house and you would want to show your guests. If you've done the projects outside, you also want to show your guests and point out all the work and the pleasure and all the time and energy and everything that went into it.
Well, and it's something different. It's like there's life in it, whereas these inanimate objects in your house they're stale, they're stable. They, you know what I mean? These things outside we don't control. Mm-hmm. We do our best to cultivate. But to see things die and come back to life again and grow, there's something really, really amazing about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you take pride in the things you're nurturing, that you're trying to keep alive.
Well, Mom, I know that you've particularly enjoyed your herb gardens. That's something that Molly, Julie's daughter, had posted on her Insta stories just this week in Texas. She cleared out a bed and is planting an herb garden. So I wanted you to tell us a little bit how you got started with your herb gardens and the unique benefits of an herb garden.
Well, it was a perfect storm of gardening magazines and books combined with buying that Victorian farmhouse, which just happened to have an abandoned barnyard next to it. The barn wasn't there anymore, but the field was there with feet deep fertile soil right across from the driveway along the street. We had a creek, and there were lots of stones, and we hauled stones from the creek. We made a stone wall on one end of it, and then we made a picket fence and an arbor on the one entry side. I started to lay little pathways through my herb garden with extra stones from the creek. Then I started to research the plants, and I just wanted one of everything. So I went and started buying all the herbs, and they just started growing. And it was so interesting reading about their personalities because each herb has its own color, texture, use. The benefits of growing herbs are that they add beauty, color, and texture to the landscaping. They provide aromatherapy anytime you want it. They can be useful in cooking. It's so nice when they call for fresh thyme or fresh rosemary, and you can just run out and snip some and put it in a meal you're making. It's also for medicinal uses. It's used for crafts and gifts. I used to have a potting shed, and I'd hang my herbs and dry them, and then have people over, and we'd make dried herb wreaths and use them for gifts. Or if I was going to out someone's for dinner, I'd take a little paper doily, run out and get some lavender, put it in the paper doily, fold it, tie a ribbon, and I had an instant little hostess gift.
And wouldn't that be so cute to get that?
Yeah, it attracts bees, butterflies, hummingbirds. Growing herbs are easy. They love well-drained soil, and they love full sun. They like the Mediterranean climate. And don't be afraid to thin out the plants. I once read a little gardening sign. It said, you have to be cruel in order to garden. You have to pull those plants out that are coming into other places that aren't wanted.
Which herbs do you like to grow?
I had a huge garden. It was probably 50 or 75 feet by 50 feet. It was huge.
Really big.
It was like the ones you see in the magazines. It took up that whole barnyard. So I have had just about every kind of herb that there is. Anything you have.
I just haven't had that much luck with them. I don't really understand. Like, they would always go to seed. Does that mean I'm not cutting them enough?
Well, certain herbs do tend to go to seed, and I tend to stay away from those. After I tried them once and they didn't work, and I just tried to stay away from the ones that weren't.
Like basil and cilantro. Did you not?
Exactly. And
those are the two I wanted to grow.
I know. And they're very difficult to grow.
Okay.
And I tried planting some cilantro last year. We planted it, and the next day it was totally gone. The rabbits had eaten it right down to the ground. Yeah, you're going to have to do that one maybe in the house, like in a windowsill garden or whatever. But you'd be surprised that the plants that you wouldn't have thought of as herbs, but in the herb books they are listed as herbs, and a lot of them are just flowering plants too. The possibilities are endless.
All right. Well, Julie, I know that you enjoy a different type of gardening too. I've heard it called different things. Are all these things the same? Raised bed gardening, square foot gardening, is that all the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. It's just when I started mine, I read the book by Mel Bartholomew called The Square Foot Garden.
Okay.
So that's just his brand or title of it, I guess. But it's basically just a wooden box, raised bed that you fill with a third peat moss, a third vermiculite, and a third blended compost. And I mean, that dirt is so soft, like weeds. If you do have a weed, you just pull it out because it's just the dirt's so soft. The first couple years, I mean, I had tomatoes that I couldn't even eat, and they were just big and beautiful. And then I did something stupid, and I added grass clippings one winter, not composted. I didn't know what I was doing. And so then I've had weeds ever since.
Oh, no.
So I'm in the process of starting over because we used an old sandbox. We had probably a 10-foot square sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just way too big. Typically they're 4x4 or 4x6 to where you can walk around the whole thing and still reach in. Like I have to walk in mine. And that's kind of the purpose is you're not ever supposed to step on the soil. That's why it stays so soft. I'm going to start over with mine, get rid of my sandbox and get a true raised bed garden. And I would like it to be higher, so you don't have to bend over as far. You can just kind of walk around it.
And how much produce can you really grow in something?
Oh, a lot. Well, first of all, you divide with a grid. You divide the space into, like if it's a 4x4, you would get 16 1-foot squares.
Okay.
And when I first did mine, I put nails around the edges and tied string. Right. And he doesn't recommend that in the new and improved version because the string gets buried or it rots or it gets all tangled. He actually uses little strips of wood or PVC. I know one year I thought, forget the grid. That's just not important. And he said that's like having a parking lot with no lines. Like you have to know your space because you only grow one variety in each square. For tomatoes, you would grow one tomato in a square foot.
Okay.
Or one cabbage, one broccoli, one bell pepper. So I had 4 boxes of tomatoes, 4 of bell pepper. Then like lettuce, you could grow 4 lettuce heads in a square or 4 marigolds or 4 herbs. And then spinach, you could do 9 in a square. And then you could do 16 radishes or carrots in a square.
Okay.
So it is quite a bit of food for the space.
Sure.
Now, it's really not great for something like corn. Like a massive crop like that. I did watermelon and cantaloupe one year, and they did okay. I just don't know that there's quite enough space. Like you have to grow them vertically because there's just no room on the ground to. The advantages of that kind of garden is you don't have to till every year. You just kind of add in some new soil. The soil is super soft, and you really don't get many weeds if you treat it right. And it's easy to rotate crops by squares because you don't need to plant the same thing in the same spaces every year. The disadvantage would be, I say it's a high initial cost. Buying the boxes, the soil's not cheap. And it might require a little more watering than an in-ground garden because it's just going to dry out faster, maybe. It really is an amazing way to grow a lot of food in a small space.
Did you find that kind of gardening to be fun? I mean, did you get a lot of pleasure out of it?
It was really fun to say, oh, we're going to have a salad. Go cut the spinach.
Yeah.
Go chop up the peppers, or, get some basil for this, whatever. I mean, that's kind of fun it's really rewarding to make something with food that you've grown.
Yeah. Now, how did you keep the deer or the rabbits from eating it?
We don't really have deer. We used to when we first moved here, but I don't know, maybe with our dog, we just don't ever see him anymore. But I did put a little wire fence around it.
Okay.
So that was the other thing is since I had to climb in it, I was climbing over that fence, and I need a smaller one so that I can just reach over. And
yes.
Yeah. But no, we do have quite the crop of bunnies. So
yes. Well, one of the ways you can save money and have fun with plants, and we did mention this earlier, is to transplant and divide them. What are some neat things that you've gotten from friends?
Well, my mom recently, when I did my landscaping, I was short on some monkey grass, the variegated kind. I went to this nursery and it was $7 a pot for just a little sprig. So she said, she had double rows of monkey grass at her house, and it was under a bush. You couldn't even see the second row. So she said, just come get that. So I got like 10 plants from her.
Oh, wow.
For free. We've done that with hostas. And I know like I said, she's giving me some irises. So
yes.
Yeah.
I've actually done the same thing with the same plants. The monkey grass is so easy. And then my mom loves irises and has a lot of different colors. And those just they just bloom and bloom and divide. Like they just grow so well where she lives. We've had a lot of those.
We moved into our home 2 years ago. Last year, we went to a lady who goes to our church, who needed her gardens thinned out, and she had loads of perennials. And so we went and we did her a favor, and in turn, it was a favor for us too, because we got to have all the extra plants, and we planted them all over the yard. And also we have been dividing our hostas. They don't like to be crowded. It's almost like they love to be divided. The more you divide them, they just keep perking up and blooming and spreading. So they're really good.
When's the best time to do that?
In the spring, but I don't think I would be afraid of doing it even now. Before they bloom. I don't think you'd want to do it when they were blooming.
Okay. I have these big, beautiful round hostas. Do you just cut a row off the back or a section, to kind of keep the shape? How do you do that to make them still look good?
Some of mine were like coming over the stone border, so we chopped it off there. Other ones, we just chopped them right in the middle and put them in another spot. And it was a matter of days. Maybe it was because it was spring. I don't know, but it was in a matter of days. You wouldn't even know that you had divided them.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
It's just amazing.
All right. So one of the things that I would like to get a little bit better at is ground cover, because I see that as an easy, maintenance-free way to have landscaping, not have weeding. It stays green all the time. What is your experience with ground covers? What do you guys like?
I have none.
Oh, you don't have any, Julie? I pictured that you would have some. Okay.
Well, our front bed had it when we moved here, and I didn't like it because that's all it was. It was just like a big carpet of green, and I wanted other things. So we pulled it up.
That's funny. I'm the same way. I put, I like mulch in between my stuff.
Yeah, that's another benefit of it that I see would be getting out of mulching.
Oh.
I found it just hard to get in there and pull weeds out of it. Weeds would come up, and I
guess I was hoping that it would overpower the weeds and you wouldn't get as many.
Nothing overpowers weeds.
All right, Mom. Well, I know you like ground cover. What do you like?
Yeah,
I do. I have had great success with ivies, the English ivies in the past, although now the nurseries are reluctant to sell them. They are now under the label of an invasive plant. But the ground covers, they add interest and they fill in spaces, either large or small. If you have a place that is hard to mow, you can dig that up and plant ground cover, and then you won't have to mow that area anymore. It can fill in places between flowers and shrubs, so you don't have to weed. You have to be cruel enough to prune them back and rip them out when they start to overtake their space. But right now I have adorable little Irish moss and Scottish moss. Irish moss is a darker green. Scottish moss is the lime green. And I have them growing in little patches around my bird bath. And so every time we take the water from the bird bath, we dump it on the mosses. And they're just growing so beautifully. And all these other tiny little ones that grow close to the ground. I just love them, and just filling in little spaces. They have a big personalities.
When I hear my mom talk about them, it makes me want to look at them again because I don't know that I've even noticed them before.
Where do you buy the mosses?
I bought them at Lowe's.
Oh.
But they stay green all winter too. And so, like I said, I have my little corner, my little sanctuary corner. And to look out there and see those adorable mosses and my tiny little ground covers growing, I just love it.
Do you guys feel like you've been renewed when you're gardening, Julie and Mindy?
Yeah. And I kind of like what it's not. It's not a screen. It's not a phone. It's not a computer. It's not a television. It's part of the world that we've kind of lost touch with.
Right.
It grounds you. No pun intended.
It really does.
It does.
Because it takes time. It's not always immediate. And that's really kind of nice because you invest in something that will then reap a reward at some point in time. I totally agree with Nancy and Julie that I do feel so refreshed. Bryce and I love to walk around the yard in the evenings and, we'll pick a weed or two and that's kind of it. But just like touching it, smelling it, walking around in it, looking at it, it just really is a huge stress reliever.
Well, I know that I feel inspired. I mean, I feel like, what have I been missing out on all these years? Well, listeners, I don't know if you feel that way, but we are going to have pictures of my mom's and Julie's and Mindy's gardening over the years to kind of inspire you. And we would love to see pictures of your gardens. If you have anything growing this spring that you want to show off, take a picture, tag us at Midlife Matters Podcast on Instagram, and we would love to see what you have going on. Because I know that is one of the fun parts of gardening is showing other people.
Yeah, and it's inspiring to look at.
This was fun. Thanks, Mom, for coming on.
Thank you.
Oh,
Sharing
thank you
your
for having me.
gardening
I've
wisdom.
enjoyed it.
And we will see you all next week.
All right.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Friends, we're so glad you joined us today. If you enjoy Midlife Matters, we hope you'll tell a friend. Show them how to find us on their phone and hit the free subscribe button so that they never miss an episode. They can also download and listen to each episode right from our website, midlifematterspodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Midlife Matters Podcast. You can also email us at midlifematterspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday. Bye.